All right, 3, 2. I just clicked the button, so we shall see. There's always like a 2-minute lag. There you go, John. Thumbs up. You gotta do more than thumbs up. All right, got any more thumbs up? All right, ready? There you go. Here's my spin. I'm in my swivel chair. Hey, good morning, everybody. We are live. At least that's what it says in my Facebook Live settings. So I'm just gonna assume we're live right now. This is our 11th DuPage Real Producers Jam session. We started these in Chicago back in June of 2020. And before we started doing them privately, when we were doing them privately, and then a realtor had the idea, said, "Hey, Andy, I like these little collab sessions you're putting on. You should do them Facebook Live." I think it's just a creative way to connect people in the pause of our in-person events. So they actually became a thing. And so obviously we started in the city, got really good feedback, and just rolled them out to the west suburbs, because although we all sell and are all plugged into the industry in Illinois, the suburbs and the city, I mean, are two separate markets, and there's a lot of synergies between both. So we try to keep one for DuPage, one for Chicago, and we're gonna start rapping about real estate once I get done droning on and we have everybody introduce themselves. So our primary mission statement with our platform is to connect, elevate, and inspire realtors and just industry professionals who support realtors to essentially, reputable businesses to help realtors push deals across the finish line. And it's an honor just to be sharing the screen with these individuals. So I'm going to have briefly everybody introduce themselves. I'll have the partners introduce themselves. Then I am going to get out of the way. And so that all being said, Natalie, why don't you go ahead and kick us off first?
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Weber. I'm with Keller Williams Experience in Downers Grove. And I've been in the industry since 2007, so 14 years. And a little thing about me is I am a huge Disney fan. So big Disney fan right here.
Lisa, I think you're next.
Okay, I'm Lisa Koonce. I'm with RE/MAX of Naperville. I've been there since 2000, well over 21 years. Fun fact about me, I don't know if it's fun or not, but I always tell people I kind of grew up in the family, kind of bleed red, white, and blue. My mother's been doing it since I was 6 years old. So I have been a RE/MAX child, now adult, my entire life. So I guess I was meant for this, even though I fought the real estate initially. I went to the corporate world, and now I sell real estate.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mala Gandhi with At Properties at Downers Grove. I've been in the business for 20 years. And also a fun fact, I am also a child of real estate. So my family's been in real estate for a very long time, and it just was inevitable that it was in my blood and I would get into real estate.
Mike, go ahead, sir. Oh.
Hey, Michael LaFido, eXp Realty. I've been licensed since 2000. I did not grow up with parents that were in real estate. Had parents, blue collar jobs, but always was entrepreneurship as far as my dad detailing cars on weekends to make ends meet, that sort of thing. So I also run a national training consulting company. And fun fact about me is big runner. I've run 11 marathons, and now, real big with Orange Theory Fitness since I'm not running marathons. Don't have the time now.
Yeah, that's a big chunk of time. So before I allow the partners to introduce themselves, I'm going to do a quick little plug. People ask me, "Hey, I love the magazine. You guys feature cool people. I searched it online. I can't find it." I'm like, that is very intentional. We are a private publication, only goes to the top 500 agents per market. However, we do have an app. It's called Digipub, DIGA, P as in Paul, U as in umbrella, B as in boy. You can get it on your phone, tablet, etc., wherever you can download apps, Google Play, Apple Store, all that fun stuff. The nice thing about it, it's kind of an archive. You can search past issue. It has basically like a PDF of all the past issues. So there you go. And as much as the realtors love what we do, I will tell you right now, I just want to give a little bit of love to our partners. I cannot do what I do. I'm essentially unemployed without our partners, okay? If you want me to just be candid about it. And our partners have carried us through COVID. I wouldn't be where I'm at. So I'm very grateful to have John, Stuart, and Dan on this call, just adding value from their perspective, how their field affects real estate. So I'm gonna allow the partners to introduce themselves, and then we're gonna start wrapping. So John, go ahead, my friend.
Good morning, I'm John Puscheck with Prager Moving and Storage Company. We are a house of goods mover, local, interstate, and international. I've been in the business my entire life. It's a family business that my dad started. I took over and have been operating for the last 20 years. A little fun fact is co-panelist Dan Rock and I's boys played hockey together and won a state championship.
That's awesome. Go ahead, Dan.
Hi, Dan Rock from Guaranteed Rate. I've been in the business 26 years. John stole my thunder, but about the championship. No, that's good. My son's actually playing hockey out in New Jersey right now. So he's continuing on with that crazy sport. And Natalie, just for you, here's my coffee mug for today.
Nice.
You can do that. There you go.
Well played. Stuart, go ahead, my man.
Stuart Polizzi, law office, Stuart Polizzi. Been in practice 20 years next year. My kids and I do road trips every year all over the country. Weird fact for us is my uncle's Tom Dreesen, who used to tour with Frank Sinatra for about 15 years. So there you go.
That's cool. I would have had no idea. So this is the part where Andy shuts up, okay? You guys are here to kind of talk shop and add value to one another, but also just anybody who happens to be tuning in. So Mala, you had a great kind of point when we were pre-gaming to kick us off. So I'm going to divert to you and get out of the way, and we'll start talking real estate in the fall in DuPage. Go ahead. I'll open it up.
Awesome. So I just was wondering, based on what everyone's been seeing, what do you feel the trajectory of next year is going to be? Also, how are you guys reigniting the fire under some of the buyers who got burnt out this past year?
Well, I'll kind of jump in. I'm sorry. I don't know if we're raising hands or taking turns or whatever. I guess what I would tell you, I kind of told my buyers that we can't stop because now there's not as many buyers out in the market right now because they've kind of given up. So I still have my buyers out there because every day someone new is putting their house on the market. I'm putting a new one on Friday, even though it's going to go on the week right before Thanksgiving, the weekend before Thanksgiving, which is like, oh my God, holidays. But there will be a buyer for it because people are out there looking still. And I've told them that if we keep looking now, we'll have less competition. So I have, for the most part, mine are still looking. They do feel beat up. You're exactly right. They're not excited. They're not excited, but they still need something, and it's still a want and a need. So they're still going through the motions. Once we find a house, I think they'll be excited. But I mean, they still get a spark, but they're always still in the back of their mind playing, are we going to get this one? Are we going to get let down? What are we going to have to do? But personally, I don't see the pricing going as high over list price as it was. What do you guys think?
I agree.
Agree. Well, I've recently had some clients that we have been working together since February. And we, they were really, really deflated on a month to month, did not want to go through the holidays and their month to month in the city. And just instilling that, that not only are new properties coming up, but there have been properties that came on the market really overpriced several months ago. And now we're seeing those price drops. So, we were able to secure property that had significant price drops over the past month. And we could not even believe the great deal that they got because we kept our eye on this property. So I think the lesson is not only are new properties coming up, because that's a constant in our industry. And I think we're seeing that more often now is sellers are not waiting to list because the market is still moving so quickly and there still are really motivated buyers. So when I have, sellers I contact that we're waiting to list, I'm telling them, I have buyers that are motivated. So if there's motivated buyers out there, don't wait to list, because listing is going to keep our market moving throughout the season, through the fall, winter, and then into the spring again. And I think we're going to see a very, very active market this spring as well.
Yeah, I mean, I believe obviously interest rates are still going to be low. They might go up a little bit. I do feel like inflation will make rates go up a little bit, but still a great time to buy. It's supply and demand. Sometimes we overcomplicate things, but there's still going to be a huge demand for housing. And I was at a conference recently, and they shared how many homes annually sell in a given year, and that's not going to change much. So I do feel like there's still going to be a huge demand for housing, even though rates might bump up a little bit. It's still all relative. When I bought my first place in '98, rates were great at 6.5%, right? So they're still amazing right now. And then the other aspect of things, which I think Natalie mentioned, maybe it was Lisa, but this is a great time right now to have your home on the market. Do you put the home on the market during the holidays, or do you take it off? My philosophy has always been, would you rather be one of a few homes on the market for that reload buyer, or that buyer that finally got their home sold, or that buyer that says, you know what, let's go, whatever it is the reason that they want to look in November or December. I think you have a higher probability of selling if your home's on the market, right? I mean, Wayne Gretzky says you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So as long as we as agents manage our clients' expectations and we let them know that it might be fewer showings during November, December, January, but it's going to be a higher quality of showing versus maybe some tire kickers when it's warm outside and people want to just go look at homes.
Mike, I completely agree. I think that houses, I don't know, there's a beauty and a charm in a house during the Christmas time or the holiday time. It has its own uniqueness and cozy feel. And I think that the buyers that come through the houses are so serious. Like they're on a mission. They want a house and they want to buy. So I think those are definitely great points.
And they're very motivated and they've been ready to buy. And that's kind of what, because you said, how are you keeping that spark with those buyers, is, now is our chance, because we have less competition, because a lot of buyers take a backseat in the holidays, but the buyers who are ready to go and they've lost out all season are the ones that are your most motivated buyers, and they're the ones who are ready to close and move in. Even in January and February, when there's blizzard conditions, they just want in. And those sometimes make for the best transactions. And then you get the most, the seller and buyer are all happy because this great deal came together. And some of my best closings happen during the winter and holiday season.
Yeah.
Just from a producer's point, every deal I see is closing in the twos. So rates are still great. There's, like as Mike was saying, I know we're going to see some inflationary pressures because that's going to make a difference. The other element I'm not seeing as much as a lot of people were fighting appraisal contingencies a couple of months ago as a even more seller leverage that existed. I'm not seeing that as much. So maybe that's softening a little bit so buyers have a better opportunity. But I do see investors that cannot find a property to flip. So there's not a lot of property out there, and that's been true for the last 2.5 years. It's just the way the market is.
Well, and speaking of investors, that's really the driver too with what's happening with new construction now too. I think that, if you guys want to talk a little bit, new construction market this year, I'm lighting the fire a little bit with my buyers because I do have a lot of developers I work with that are not listing their properties yet. So in years past, we'll acquire the land, the developer will acquire the land, and they'll want to list it immediately, right? To try to capture that buyer sooner rather than later. They can make their customizations and then start the project. Now, a lot of builders are waiting because there's still that supply and demand issue and causing a volatile market with the supply chains and pricing. So a lot of builders are waiting for foundations to be in and then framing to be up, so they have more solid pricing on their property before they list. So I tell my buyers, you know, there are more properties coming. Don't feel deflated. I know a lot of the builders I'm working with are waiting until, you know, at least foundation and framing is up to list so they can have their pricing secured. But it's definitely been very hard to find land. So we're seeing a scarcity in new construction.
New construction right now is key.
And what are you seeing rates next couple of months? What do you foresee?
Well, we really feel that, you know, we're just at the beginning of the inflationary cycle, if you will. We're expecting a lot of, you know, really continuing on with appreciation, maybe not the crazy spring we saw. And we think rates are going to move up a little bit, but the Fed just started their taper program that's going to begin at the end of this month. So we don't feel the Fed's going to raise rates anytime soon, maybe at the end of 2022. But we're seeing rates, you know, stay low. Right now, they've moved up into the low threes. We've had a bad maybe week or so on the bond market. And we would expect rates to probably enter that, you know, low three, mid three range next year, but nothing horrible. And I put it in perspective with people. When we saw a massive refinance boom, 01, 02, 03, the lowest we saw rates get back then was 5.25. So we have plenty of room here. I don't think rates are going to shut down the market anytime soon.
That's great.
To Natalie's point about the builders and investors, another thing we dealt with in the summer was lumber prices getting completely out of control. And I think they've come back. So that might be why your builders are now getting closer to basically getting on the market. I think this summer shocked them because prices tripled when it came to lumber. So they couldn't make a decision to get listed because they had no idea how much it was going to cost them to get finally built. And that's settled down a little bit too. So.
Well, the big issue too is they were listed. So they were listed pre, you know, major supply purchases. So you're listing, you know, at a certain price, and then you're having to purchase lumber at an exponential price that, like you said, you know, Stuart, was a complete shock. And we saw some builders increasing prices, you know, after they listed. I even saw some builders my clients were under contract with that actually asked, you know, for more, like prices went up mid-contract. And so my clients had to make decisions whether they want to wait for lumber prices to go down or absorb that cost. But, you know, we were able to pivot. We were able to flex through it. And I think it's a huge learning curve for not only my clients, but all the, you know, investors and developers that are in this market. I think we've all learned from it, and also how to move forward so you can capture a really great price, but then there's still a value to the buyer.
Natalie, did you have builders go back to buyers? I think this is what you're saying, and basically say, I can't build your house anymore at this price. Now it's going to be another $100,000. Either we stop now, or you cancel the contract. Is that what you're basically saying you had happen?
So I did have, I had a couple different situations. I had some very seasoned builders on the list side who, you know, said, you know what, we are going to absorb it. Our reputation is important. We have a lot of projects in the works, and we are going to absorb it, and we're going to just move forward, and we're going to close. And this was a learning lesson. But then I also had a transaction where it was a smaller scale property where your profit margins are much less. And so, you know, we're talking like under $500,000. So those builders, they have a much smaller profit margin. And so they came up to my clients and said, look, we're going to have to put a hold if you want to keep at this price, or here's the information on how much lumber has gone up. So do you want to pause and we wait for lumber to go down? Or do you want to help pay for this increase? We'll split the cost and you can move forward with your project. And my clients chose to move forward with their project. And they're very happy that they did. We closed this week.
That's all that matters. You closed.
Right. And I mean, see, that's the thing. It's information. So if everyone has the information on how to move forward, buyers are very responsive to that. They understand.
Well, and I agree. I think buyers, they still want these construction houses. So they're willing to absorb some of the pricing because they see it in everyday life. Cost has gone up on everything. I mean, groceries, everything has gone up. So they understand it to some degree. And I do think if we just continue to educate our buyers, they're gonna still move forward, even though pricing's gone up, whether it's new construction or houses, the resale.
And it was
I
very
agree.
relative. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Mala.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say really quick, it's all relative, right? Because when you go under contract for new construction, you're 5 months out. So when we went under contract, it was a really great value. It was pre-construction 5 months out. And so we actually saw appreciation from the time even they started framing. So my client was open to a higher cost because we already knew they were getting a really great value. So it made sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think that next year, a lot of buyers, as far as new construction is concerned, they are going to factor in a bit of the appreciation. And it's going to be a little bit more palpable because we've all kind of unfortunately gotten used to this inflation that's going on currently. But I don't think it's going to be that detrimental to where they're going to be priced out of whatever they're looking at.
A funny, well, it's not really funny, but a side note about, listings and instilling the fire with buyers is how many clients are coming up to me, just very last minute deciding to move out of state. And I don't know if you guys are experiencing that too. But that's one of the, things I'm telling my buyers now is there are always people that are just deciding on a whim that they just want to move out of state. And I think those are the properties that come up all throughout the year. And John, speaking of moving out of state, you were stating, about shortage in supply and demand. I would love to hear more about how it's affecting your industry.
Yeah, thanks, Natalie. Great points that you all have made that prove that what you do is not just sell a house, but you're a trusted advisor to your sellers and your buyers. And this is one of the things that, most of our business comes from referrals from real estate agents. One of the key things we've been saying for a number of years is, we're still part of the supply chain. We use trucks, and everybody knows there's a shortage out there. It's really important, almost like getting pre-financed, is to get everything set up with a moving company, regardless of who it is. Get the survey done, get the estimate done, get everything ready. We find a lot of people just wait until they have a sale and they have a move date. And by then, there may not be capacity. There may not be a truck available with us or anybody else for the date that closing happens. And then, you're stuck trying to move things around. Once we have everything in place, it's very easy to flip that switch and say, okay, we have a date, get everything set up. We're seeing, just like there's an issue with cars, trucks now all have computer chips in them. There's a shortage of new trucks. The used trucks prices are going through the roof. There's a shortage of drivers. Walmart, Amazon, the big freight companies are sucking up everybody coming out of truck driver school. So we're continuing to see the capacity on our side shrink, even though the demand not only stays the same, but keeps, growing. So there's definitely going to be, continue to be supply demand crunches within the moving industry. And that's a big thing as we're coming into the winter time, which slows down a little bit. It's not as big a deal, but once we hit spring and into summer next year, It's going to be really important that all your clients really get things set up ahead of time and are ready to go. We do see, you know, to your point, Natalie, there are a lot of people leaving Illinois. And a good chunk of them are empty nesters, and a good chunk of them are just people who have been told you can work wherever you want now. There's no offices anymore. So if you don't want to, you don't have to commute to Chicago. And we have a lot of volume going to the southern states, people trying to get to better climates, better economic environments. And to your point, we see things happen very quickly. I mean, you guys are all doing a great job. You're selling homes quick. And so, yeah, there's a lot of volume that's moving out of state. There's not as much coming back, but we are seeing more corporate volume. Corporate relocations are still fairly good about people coming back into the Illinois. So we'll continue to see, I think, a good number of buyers, as well as those, you know, you see it every day, the buyers that are just moving up, that started in a apartment condo and that are looking now for that first, second, third home in the right school districts and the right environment, which again, DuPage County is great for all of that. So, but we definitely are seeing the squeeze, inflationary prices and a squeeze in our capacity across the industry.
Tagging on John's point, one of my clients is a Peterbilt salesman. Last year, he sold 500 semis, but because they couldn't get the parts to build them, he only was allocated 40 sales. And he doesn't expect it to get better next year. So with that, there are no trucks. There's no parts to service the trucks for the sake of the warranties that are out there, is what he's telling me a couple of weeks ago. He's thinking moving to Florida to take on a different position because it's just not working out with Peterbilt. With that, John's point is planning ahead as best you can. I guess my question to John would be, you and realtors an ideal with the situation where closing dates are in flux. So when somebody schedules a closing with you in order to move, and now suddenly, for whatever reason, we're moving the date, how easy is it for them with what your capacity is to kind of move that date? That's a lot of anxiety when it comes to my clients when they fall into that situation. And I just didn't know, how do they deal with that?
That's a great question, Stuart. You know, we try and be as flexible as possible. And we, you know, there might, a lot of times when dates are changing, there is some flexibility. They might say, hey, we need to move to the 15th. You know, we might say, well, how about the 16th or 17th? And usually, because they haven't nailed anything down, there's some flexibility there. We do the best we can to work with clients to try and, you know, make sure that there's a truck available to them. And usually we can work that out. You know, every once in a while you have someone says it's got to be this date. If we can't do it, we would rather say we can't do it than promise something that we can't deliver on. But there's good flexibility when you get into changes. The key thing is once we get things locked down, you know, we get our schedule set. It's the people that come last minute that look for somebody to move them next week, or even in a lot of cases 2-3 weeks out, where, you know, once our capacity is filled, our capacity is filled.
With the trend of 30-day closings, I'm sure you've been bombarded with last minute scheduling.
You know, it's funny. I look out and this happened ever since COVID, when everything kind of just stopped for a month and a half in April and May. Ever since then, we've been looked out and go, how does next month look? Doesn't look great. And then 3 weeks later, everything is filled up. And that's one of the challenges we have too, is that we have less and less lead time. My dispatch and operations department, you know, is working real hard to accommodate as much as we can. But yeah, we are, if you asked me, you know, a month ago how November looked, I would have said, you know, we're a little soft. Now everything is filling in all the way through Thanksgiving. So yeah, you're right. That's made a big difference in terms of how we can plan.
Hey, John, just kind of piggybacking on that. When I always have clients, they're talking about moving, our close dates might be 3rd or 4th week of the month, but I always try and tell them to move middle of the month because usually there's more flexibility. Is that still rule of thumb or not so much anymore?
Yeah, that's good rule of thumb, Lisa. It's when we get to the end of the month, that seems to always be the time when people, you know, want to go, whether it has to do with closings, the trickle down from apartment leases. So yeah, if you can get towards the middle of the month, that is always preferable than the end of the month. But one other thing too, I'll mention in regard to closings that we've seen a big spike up in is issues where we also provide storage for customers, and we've seen a big spike up in storage over the last year and a half because people will sell their houses right away and have nowhere to go. And so we've seen a big jump in our storage services, and that a lot of times has to do with some closing issues as well too, where we may need to hold something for a week or two to get a final something done on the closing side. But the key thing for us is always, as you all know too, it's always about planning and how well you've planned and prepared, because we can always be flexible once a plan is in place. The difficult part is when someone comes to you and it's, hey, I got to be out, and we're just starting from the very beginning of a process.
A trend I'm seeing a lot more because of all of this out-of-state movement, whether it's in or out of Illinois, and also a shortage of supply on the purchase side. I have a lot of clients doing leasebacks now. Like, I'm doing more leaseback options than I've ever done before. And I do think it's great for flexibility. And then it allows, my clients both on the, sell and buy side to line up and maybe have a little bit more movement in their closing if both parties are aware of it and okay with a little bit of movement. So we were having to shift and pivot a little bit by putting that out there before we even have a contract. So on the list side, informing buyers that, hey, look, we may need a little bit flexibility in the closing date. Are you open to doing a 1-month lease back? So that way, if we have a couple weeks change in the closing date, are you okay with that? And surprisingly, buyers and sellers, that there's been so much more flexibility with closing dates and these lease back options that it's really helping like a more amicable, transaction, because everyone understands that it's really hard right now to secure a house. So I am seeing a lot more understanding in the market with closing dates and, even 1-2 month lease back options, even though sometimes the attorneys and lenders, it's a little bit more work for you guys on the attorney side, but we're getting it done.
I think it's really smart to do that before you sign the contract. I mean, if you hand it to us, I'm sorry, it's going to become a legal issue, and I don't think you want that. So if you guys get that agreed, even verbally in advance, everyone sets an expectation. It's a very smart way to set your seller up to have a more convenient transfer for when they move on. And there's other issues that come up too that I always tell my realtors, if you can get this in even verbally agreed to in advance, the lawyers are not going to change up people's expectations, right? We're trying to get a deal done too, but you don't want to just throw it blanketly at a buyer. Now we're in attorney review. Let's put it out there in advance and get it done. And it's a smart way to transition that. I think that's a great way.
So Stuart, kind of piggyback on that, and Natalie too. When your sellers are doing the rent backs, are they paying the buyers to rent it back, or are they just making it part of the initial contract? Yeah, we get to stay an extra 30 days, or how are you guys doing it? Because I hate rent backs. That's always been my nightmare. I'm like, I hate them. I highly discourage them. But when you sell in the city, that's very, very common. When I sell out in the burbs, it's not as common.
The standards is the seller's going to pay the PITI for the buyer, right? That's the norm.
Right.
I have had some attorneys come looking for more on these situations because they feel like they have leverage, but that's the standard. PITI, you set aside some escrow just in case there's any damage. You maintain the insurance. It shouldn't be complicated. And again, that's, the leverage that sellers have had now for a couple of years. That's a way to use a little bit of that leverage in a way that can be mutually beneficial on the back end. So, you may not be able to use the leverage maybe in attorney review, but use it for something like that. You've got the leverage, take advantage of it in order to get your seller a better transition. So.
Yeah, I've had 2 transactions this year with rent back options. So Lisa, you're right. It's not as common out here in the suburbs, but I feel like more now so than ever with limited supply and demand. You have buyers willing to be more creative. Usually it's frowned upon on the purchase side and it's less risky for the seller, right? So but I think parties are willing to be more creative, and I think sellers have more leverage in certain price points. So I have a property right now that was in the private network. The purchaser is moving here from out of state. If March 1st, they're both doctors, and we put it in the private network, and we disclosed that the preferred closing date was mid-April to May 1st. And so we knew that it was a limited pool of buyers that would want to have a moved out closing date. But what I encouraged the seller was to have a closing date of, in this case, it's the first week of January, January 7th, because my explanation to the sellers, you control the money now. God forbid if something happens to the buyer, they get hit by a car or whatever, you are in control of the money. The benefit to the purchaser is rates are, probably not going to dip too much lower. If anything, they're stable or go up. So you're locking in your rate, because many, Dan can explain this, but most of the time you're not going to lock in more than a 90-day rate, if that. So it was kind of a win-win. And in that case, yeah, they're paying, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. But I've also had a deal where, the buyer kind of came in a little bit less. So the seller says, I want to close here. I'm not going to pay rent back. We'll put money away in escrow. And if the buyer really wants it, they're willing to be, play ball, so to speak.
I've also seen way more rent backs this year. And I agree, it's just accommodating to the circumstances of the market. Just a little shift. I was wondering, what do you guys think is a sweet spot in the market price-wise? What do you think is moving? Super fast? What are you seeing stalling? Just curiosity.
I'll go. So it's very interesting, because I am actually seeing a lot of very, very fast movement on all properties priced well. And I know that sounds, so broad, but even in the luxury market, where, typically you see a little bit longer of a market time, I'm seeing even luxury homes that are priced well, like at market value, moving still within, days on the market with multiple offers, because of all the buyers standing and waiting, for that right property to come up. But the most movement, I think the most amount of buyers I personally have that are just properties that are so hard to find are in between that, 500, I would say like $800,000 price point, because they're really, it's so hard to find a really ideal property between 500,000 and 800,000. And that seems to be a lot of people's sweet spot budget, where they're hoping to get even like 650, 750, where there's really not that many homes in that price point that come up.
So when I think of, go ahead, Lisa.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, when I think of that type of buyer, I feel like that's a byproduct of COVID then, that they've kind of just been suffocating in their house and they want to expand, or things have shifted and now they're working from home with that price point. So that's interesting.
Well, and I was just going to kind of piggyback. I find it more of my second time buyer. So if my buyer is in a small condo, say that's 150, 200, they're jumping up to 400. If my buyer is in a 350 townhouse, they're jumping up to 5 to 6. So I feel like it's a little more of my second time buyer than a certain price point. It just kind of depends where they're at. And it also depends on, I think it depends if you're in Naperville or if you're in Downers or Hinsdale, or, it just kind of depends where you're at too. Carroll Stream's a different market than we are in Naperville. So different price.
Yeah, that's a great point, Lisa. I think it's all relative, but I do agree, Natalie, that the lower price points, just because there's more buyers out there, those tend to be, more there's definitely more demand for those. But it's interesting enough. So I'm marketing a home up in Glencoe, big time NFL players home, 4.6 million. And we had about 20 showings in the past month and a half or so. And, listing agent must accompany all showings. So, through being there and talking to the buyers directly, many are moving from the city to the North Shore in that example. And there's just so much limited supply in those upper price points as well, that it's still a great time to sell in those, pockets.
Hey, while we have time, I need a screenshot. I don't need one, but if you would humor me, of everybody smiling. This screenshot may or may not be in a future issue of DuPage Real Producers. I'm going to throw that out there. Hold on. One rule, okay? Do not be like my children, okay? I'm going to say to smile, and when I stop smiling, then you stop smiling, okay? So don't hold it for like half a second and think you're done. And okay, you ready? See, that's supposed to get you to smile, so I don't have to like preface it, all right? Okay, ready? 2, 3. All right, hold on. I think, let me see if we nailed this on the first try. It's a winner.
Yeah.
They're a winner.
That's a winner. Sorry for the interruption. But no, this is, I love where the conversation's taken us.
So how do you accompany all the showings in Glencoe? That sounds like a fun house.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool property. So I have a co-listing agent. So between him and myself, we require, proof of funds and letter from a banker, and we do some due diligence. And there's been pushback on some agents up there. I had one agent say, we don't show proof of funds up here in the North Shore, and kind of came across a little arrogant, if you will. And I said, well, I respect where you're coming from, but this is a request that my seller has. So
Right.
So yeah, that's we've doubled up some showings, which always helps create a little urgency where they're not there at the same time, but they're if you will back to back, and they're aware that there's other activities. So it's definitely not a stale listing. We did put it under contract last week, so set to close in less than 2 weeks. So
that's awesome. Well, I've been telling my buyers, and I mean, the suburbs are just so hot, that going to see a property on the weekend is very similar to back in the day when we would try to get into a club so urgently and everyone's patiently waiting outside, and we're like, I can't wait to see what's inside. And there would just be a line of buyers to get into this house. And it just felt so, like once you get in, you're like, finally, I got into the club. It was just, this market has been unreal.
I expect a meme with some sort of clubbing language from your mom on Facebook soon. You create some meme, with some bottles like going out there.
Yeah.
True though.
I have a question for the realtors here on the panel. A little more than half our business is in corporate relocation transferees, and we saw that really grind to a halt with COVID, right? You couldn't send people on house hunting trips. People weren't sure what they were doing. Companies relocating. So are you seeing a pickup in corporate relocation business and buyers coming in who are part of a corporate moving program?
I did first, second quarter, but then third quarter, fourth quarter, it's died. Usually my fourth quarter is pretty busy with relo because they want them all in place for January. So I think that at least my partners, since they were, kind of on a halt through COVID, they were really busy beginning of this year. And then I'm not finding them moving as much, or at least in the process for December like they usually are. That's me.
I've seen some relocation buyers and people relocating to the area, and a lot of the earlier on in COVID, a lot of the complaints that they had were that they weren't even allowed to get into the house. Many people wouldn't even show them the place just because the restrictions were so tough, and they were veering more towards virtual showings, but now that's kind of gotten a little bit more lax, but they're still out there and looking. So
I saw on the both sides, on both sides, on the listing side and on the buyer side. I just had a closing where, my clients were the buyers and the seller was the relocation. And I was seeing, I would say 50-50 on that end of it. And, when you're on the buyer side of a seller relocation, it's a different process, right? It's like a little bit more, dragged on. It's a little bit more time consuming back and forth. But I'm actually seeing it more on the listing side where the sellers are moving out of state for, Texas, Florida, Arizona relocation. And they are happening pretty smoothly. They're just taking a little bit longer. So I think you have to have the right buyer that's open to it. So my clients were happy to get the house, so it worked out really well. But on the listing side, so I've had several relocation buyers that closed out over the summer. Interesting enough, several purchased my new construction listing. So that was really interesting this summer. I saw very heavy relocation buyers coming in from out of state, very heavy, looking for new construction. So Elmhurst, Downers Grove, both incidences, we had relocation buyers first go under contract via Zoom, not even seeing the property in person yet, because they were the ones that gave really, really strong offers. And so they would, then come on site, still, fall in love with the house all over again. And they were very, motivated buyers and really just wanting to secure the properties because they had a relocation backing. So really great buyers to have. So I am still seeing it, just not as much as the summer and spring months.
Same. I would say the same, on some of the upper price points, you see relo executives, from big publicly traded companies relocating here out of state. And I'm, seeing more and more of that now than I did, a year ago.
Quick question, going back to what Natalie said about people seeing properties on Zoom, maybe not in the property themselves. Are we seeing any trends with earnest money, having earnest money be non-refundable? Is there anything like that, Stuart, that you're seeing come up with some of these properties where people are there's maybe multiple offers and you're buying for the strongest buyer and then they haven't even seen the property?
I don't think non-refundable earnest money has really been a big issue. I've seen it occasionally several months back, but in different circumstances. It's really been the appraisal contingency waiver or some limitation on the appraisal contingency. We always have one in our letter, most attorneys do. And therefore, they might have a clause where if a $400,000 property, if it appraises at 380 or more, a seller, if the deal's set, where the seller won't contribute, the deal goes forward. Whereas if it's 380 or less, then maybe the parties can negotiate the shortage, et cetera. Not so much on the EM though. I really haven't seen anybody pressing on that, so.
From a realtor standpoint, Dan, I would hate to let my buyer, as a seller, yes, you would love the non-refundable earnest money, but from a buyer side, I would not encourage my buyer to do that at all. But that being said, it's so hard to get someone's earnest money in today's world. I feel like the attorneys always find a loophole. So I don't know if it would really stick or not. I don't know. Stuart, that's more of a question for you.
Earnest money, fighting over earnest money is really difficult. just because if you can't get the parties to agree, your option is going to the courts, and that's a lot more expensive typically than the earnest money. So people always find kind of a split the baby or whatever solution. It's very rare that isn't the end game, even when somebody actually is in breach. So.
I'm not seeing as many appraisal waivers as I was before. Appraisal gap waivers, rather.
I would agree, Mala. I would say March, April, May, they came with
Oh.
every contract.
Oh my God.
Now I would say I'm not seeing as many.
Mhm.
Another great reason to buy right now.
It is. It really is.
It really
Exactly.
is. Like, I think buyers now have a little bit more, you know, I don't want to say leverage, right? 'Cause it's still a seller's market, but same, I'm not seeing, you know, the appraisal waivers because we don't need them. You
Yeah.
know, like as a buyer, like when I'm taking out buyers, you could see that the value is there in the property and we're not having to overpay, or my clients don't feel like they're overpaying. So there's not even a need for an appraisal, you know, appraisal gap waiver or any, but I am seeing still increase higher than standard earnest money deposits from my buyers as a way to just solidify a contract because they have lost out, you know, maybe on a couple of properties with cash. I'm seeing a lot of more cash buyers. I'm seeing more cash buyers than I've ever seen. People are finding very creative ways because maybe they've lost out with competitive, you know, more competitive offers. They are finding more ways to go cash just to make sure that they do secure the property and offering higher earnest money. But I have not seen like a, you know, non-refundable earnest money type of thing.
So I have a rule in my head where I literally count to like 10 1,000 before I chime in. So this is good. I mean, we're what, 7 8 minutes out. So people say that the spring market starts what, after Super Bowl ish? Is that, I mean, that's what people say. I've heard that. You know, tell me if that's true or not. I mean,
Depends on the weather.
Yeah, it's true. It is very true.
I think we've had really busy Januaries for the past few consecutive Januaries.
Agreed. So I was going with that, and this is for the realtors and the partners. I would like to get everybody's perspective on what are maybe 1 or 2 activities that you should be doing between now and, I mean, Super Bowl is generally what, first week of February, depending on where it falls, where that Sunday falls. What should you be doing now? Like, what are the most productive activities you should be doing between now and the end of January? And anybody can start. I think this would just kind of, that way we can kind of glean insights from one another.
Yeah, the first thing I recommend to agents as well as sellers is if you are 100% committed to 2022, putting your home on the market, obviously don't wait till May or June, right? You've missed a lot of the prime season. With that being said, here in the Midwest, you know, January, February, March, your home, your exterior won't as photograph as well as it will today on November 16th, even though half the leaves are gone. I'm recommending to my clients, if you're thinking about selling, and if somebody contacts me today, get my photographer out there to get the exterior photos now, because your outside won't look as, even with half the leaves, the grass is still green. It won't look as good as it does today until, you know, April.
The leaves are fine where I'm at, the Morton Arboretum.
No wind either. I know
it looks fantastic. Sorry, I could not resist.
I think early consultation is key. I think that if you are even thinking about putting your place on the market or trying to see, you know, how the market will be, I think getting all the repairs, all of the staging, decluttering, all of that done now and not start, you know, middle of January. You need to get working on it now.
Well, on top of that is, you know, seeking a real estate agent as to what needs to be done now, right? So I was selling a house in Burridge once, and the seller contacted me after the fact, but he contacted me. I went over to his home. It was very taste specific, right? A lot of wallpaper, a lot of heavy window treatments, things that needed to be addressed. But they were hesitant because they just invested $25,000 on leaf guards. They were so proud of these leaf guards on their gutters, and I didn't want to rain on their parade, but in so many ways I cringed. Like, that was a waste to sell your home. You should have invested in other things. So again, if having these conversations with sellers, thinking about selling next year, contact an agent that knows what the heck buyers are looking for based on market research today versus doing the improvements that you think might get the home sold.
I agree 100%.
And decluttering, pretty much get rid of everything. Get rid of all of your personal effects and start doing that like right after the holidays if you can, because it does take longer than everyone always thinks. It really does. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, it took me so much longer to declutter than I thought. But meeting with an agent now to know what you can start doing is really key.
I agree. Buyers don't want to see the real life of a house. They want to see the HGTV house. So I think sellers need to realize they don't want to see the toys and the homework pile and the book bags. They want to see the picture perfect magazine house. So decluttering is essential.
Mala, you just said people don't want to see my house. That's literally backpacks, shoes everywhere, and then we clean it, looks spick and span for like 2 hours, and then it all goes down the toilet. Sorry, Natalie, I cut you off.
Now, I always tell my sellers that when your house goes on the market, it's not your house anymore. I mean, you have to look at it through the eyes of a buyer. They don't want to look at it as your house, and you as a seller can't look at it as your house. It's the buyer's house. That's hard. It's very hard because a lot of times it's emotional.
Yeah, I'd like to.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, since we only have a few minutes left, John, Dan, Stuart, what are maybe a couple things? This is sort of your time to be a little authentic. What are a couple things before we wrap up here that a realtor can do to make your world easier, and not just your world easier, but to maybe smooth the everybody has their day to day and stuff just gets overlooked. But what are maybe a couple things that if you could give a realtor like one or two tidbits of advice to make a transaction smoother from your world, what would those couple things be?
Well, I would say, kind of getting back to what question Stuart asked me earlier about issues with closing, have relationships with a couple of moving companies, because you're a trusted advisor to your clients. If you have a relationship with us, we want that closing to happen. We're part of your team, and a good quality reputable mover is going to want to work with you and make you look good for your clients. Instead of just letting them go to the internet or, which is the worst possible way to look for a moving company. So build a couple of relationships, have some people that you consider, part of, an extension of your team who will take care of your clients. And that this is the time of year when things slow down a little bit, that we start trying to build some of those relationships, because we know once the heavy season starts, you guys are all wrapped up and all you want to do is give them a phone number or a name and forget about it. So that's an important, we're an important tool to consider in your toolbox for your clients.
I love it. Dan, Stuart?
Well, I would say, again, just like John said, not going to the internet, certainly that's not the place to go for a mortgage to get pre-approved. We find that we're bailing people out quite a bit. So the sooner they get pre-approved through us, the better off, everybody's going to be, because if your closing is delayed, you've heard from John what that creates as far as a nightmare on the back end. So just making sure that they're pre-approved through a reputable company that's going to deliver.
Double down on not going on the internet for your lender. But separately, really, if they have any issues that come up with the realtors, especially on the sell side, if we can address them pre-contract, whether it's connecting with the seller or, finding solutions in advance, I'm a resource before we're in a contract. Come to me at any time. I have realtors do it all the time related to needing research on certain things or feedback or clauses, et cetera. We're a resource. So, you know, reach out to us for the sake of helping find solutions in advance if we can. That'd be the main thing I could say would help us out. And you.
I love it. I'm gonna stop the live stream now. I want to be respectful of everybody's time, so I'll stop the live stream. 3, 2. All right, we're not Facebook Live anymore, but hey, everybody, I appreciate this. Hopefully this was fun and collaborative, and you know, it starts your Tuesday well. That is really the goal of these. If you ever want to get on another one of these, shuffle the deck, get some different realtors, different partners on. I always have requests like that. So I'll let you get back to your days. I am 60 seconds over. I'm sorry, realtors and partners. I'm not going to prorate your hourly rate and send you a check for what you make in a minute. I'm not going to do that. I'll take it out of my kids' college fund. Just kidding. But seriously, I appreciate everybody's time. Just thanks for your engagement and talking shop. Have a productive rest of your day. Reach out to me if you need anything. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Take care, guys. Nice to meet
Peace.
everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.